Hi, my name is Nigel Fellowes-Freeman. I am the founder and CEO of Kanopi, and we are a data-driven embedded insurance platform that helps insurers deliver embedded insurance to customers where and when they need it through these ultimately seamless experiences. Thank you for joining. Wonderful to have you here today. Thanks for joining us for episode 5 of Building Tomorrow's Insurer as we speak to Tetiana George, the co-founder of Curium. They're a no-code SaaS platform that runs all things claims-related operations, all the way from lodgement, all the way through reporting and payment, at a fraction of the cost of traditional providers. And I'm sure that is music to everybody's ears who are looking. Everyone's always worrying about cost, and so that's a great thing to be kind of basing a business around. And she is really one of, I suppose, a real kind of unconventional creator within the insurance industry. Got these real core values of technical excellence, as well as kind of building customer expectations of instant everything. And so I do remember a really nice phrase, which was kind of maybe the Netflix of compliance, which I love. And we'll dive a little bit further into that a little bit later in the conversation. But Tetiana, thanks for your time. It's wonderful to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to the conversation.
Thanks, Nigel. It's a great summary.
You can roll me in when you want to do any startup pitches. That is just fine. Let's start at the beginning. Before we maybe go into Curium, I just maybe thought it'd be really nice to start a little bit on your history. Obviously, kind of you've been in and around the industry for a little while, and so I'd love to maybe just hear a little bit about you and your history and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, so one thing that I'm not speaking about too much is I'm Ukrainian, and I come from Ukraine. And while my country is in the news recently in the last year for obvious reasons, actually it's a very interesting history that kind of all in all led me to where I am today. So I'm the first generation of of children born in independent Ukraine. And if you know anything about that, people went into like a free fall from the absolute totalitarian state kind of mentality into market economy. They jumped without a parachute, right? So what that meant is, when I was growing up, it was a complete Wild West. That like insurance was not even on the cards, right? Mm-hmm. People lost all of their money within one day because the state used to be the saving, the pension, the social security, the medicine, and the education, and suddenly it was all gone and you were on your own. So people started accumulating wealth and assets and kind of figuring out their lives up until this point now, so 30 years down the line, where all of their wealth is destroyed again, right? And Ukraine is one of these countries that has, we talk about the problem of uninsurance all the time. Massive, massive, massive uninsurance problem. So if anything happens to you, like a rain or not even a war, but like a minor event, you're on your own. Like your livelihood is completely thrown up in the air. And I found it always very stressful. Life is very stressful when you have no plan B. And in insurance term, when you cannot cut off the risk of a black swan or a long tail event. So that kind of, in a long story short, that kind of led me into taking an interest in this very interesting industry that I did not realize could do so much good, right? So I fell into it when I was back in Switzerland in 2007. I was working for an audit company that did audits on insurers, and then very quickly I realized I'm probably very bad at looking at the past. I'm much better at looking at the future and trying to shape it. And so I went to work for Boston Consulting Group, and again, straight through into insurance practice, worked in more than 20 countries since then, all major insurers, or half of them, not all. Big names, international names, small names, all kinds of life, non-life, health, lines of business, operations, everything. And then when I came to Australia 6 years ago, apologies. I actually started working on an InsurTech that was very, very fresh, the Blue Zebra. And I helped them build the entire operation around claims. And, you went from zero to many, many $1 million in 18 months. and from 2 to 6 products within 3 years. So that was quite a fast learner journey, how to scale and how to scale efficiently.
That's amazing. And then that kind of led you to that step from Blue Zebra to Curium. I'm really interested in that step. Obviously, there was something burning in there, something that you kind of saw or wanted to do. And I'd love to hear that kind of, what was that kernel that made you take the step from really, like, I guess, fast growing MGA to start your own company?
Well, there are a couple of factors. So I personally see the world as divided between two people, the creators and the consumers. And there's no judgment, and there's just some people don't genuinely enjoy creating. It's comes, as you know, Nigel, with a lot of risk and failure and disapproval. So I love creating, and I've learned from all of this, very deep and wide international experience, and then here in Australia I've learned like the guts of the business. And at some point I felt I was ready to go and experiment. I was ready to go and actually solve the problem, because whilst I was building the Blue Zebra operation, I hit the limits of scale and what we're capable of doing very, very quickly. Like it's in all of the industry, everyone, the moment there is a problem, they keep throwing people at the problem. But sometimes they don't realize that people are the problem. The more people you add into the chain, the bigger the problem. Like, for example, the inherent, risk of human error, the inherent reporting, all kinds of oversight, QA, you name it. So people are actually sometimes the problem, and that factor and that realization led me to believe, well, there must be a better way. I'm sure there is a better way. And I'm surprised that I can't find this better way, ready off the shelf in the market. So that kind of realizing that gap, but also this inherent kind of drive to create. I was like, okay, well, there's no better time than today. And I started Curium actually in 2020 while sitting in lockdown like everyone else, thinking that's all my life came to. And I remembered, if you remember the last crisis that we went through, the GFC, I've heard a phrase, I don't remember by whom, one of the Silicon Valley tech guys, they said, never waste a good crisis. So I was like, okay, I've got the time, let me do something about it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think you're right as well. I've heard that phrase, and also that the biggest, most impactful companies in the world today have been created in the toughest environments, whether that's a global financial crisis or a COVID environment. Lots of different things like that have been companies created in super tough environments. And when you were kind of thinking about that, and you obviously got this enormous breadth of experience, breadth of experience in consulting across lots of geos, lots of businesses, etc., and then like a much deeper experience within an MGA. Kind of what pieces of both of those experiences have you taken into startup life? Like, what are the things that you've gone, yeah, I'm pulling on these things on a daily basis, and they've been kind of formational in helping you kind of start to build and grow the business?
So one very interesting experience that I had very early in my career, a post-GFC experience, it was cost cutting. it was the most dreadful thing I've ever done, and I've done it multiple times across multiple firms and multiple geographies, where large companies said, well, we can't sustain our business model any longer, and it's either die or survive. So in order to survive, we're just going to cut blank 20% of all cost. And of course, the cost is people. And so they hired, the expensive consultants to go around the world and cut people. And so I've done this multiple times, and I am a people person. So I saw them, working and living, and then the other day their entire life changed because they lost their jobs. And whilst being in the middle of this, I never fired anyone myself, but I was the execution tool for for the top management to run this, right? And I was always thinking like, and later I've realized it's nothing new. Everyone goes through this. It's a wave. You grow, you slim down. You grow, you slim down. I understand that. But what led me to thinking, well, do you really need to? You don't need to grow in the way that you, as I said, throw people at the problem, but then don't need them later, right? So if you hire someone, make sure it's the skill that you actually need and that is somewhat value generating and ideally translates into the top line. So I've implemented this thought both in the way I build technology, but also in the way I pick people working with me, that I don't need to fire them because I don't need them. And I'm not saying I'm perfect and never fired anyone, but it's more, this is the thought that I genuinely have all the time. And I'm thinking, I don't, also with my technology, I don't want to displace or come and say, oh, you can cut 20% of your staff with my tech. No, I'm saying you can use the tech to grow your top line because your people who are now focusing on something that's not really revenue generating or value generating, they can actually be doing something else, right? So I never come in and say, cut your base by 50% or something.
Really add that, like those folks are spending time on kind of truly value-added stuff, value-added projects and work that increase revenue or kind of has another kind of positive impact on the business. What you just said there was really interesting, which was thinking about people and kind of who's going to be additive. And I know that you got a co-founder, David. And so I'm always interested to hear about the co-founder story, how you find each other. Was it a speed dating experience or a long history experience? I'm really interested to hear kind of your, what it's like, but A, working with a co-founder and B, kind of how you found each other.
So in a business like mine, which is technology and insurance, it's very clear that I am the insurance part of it and he's the technology part of it. This is a very clear equation. We complement each other perfectly in the skill set, which is what I believe co-founders must be. You shouldn't replicate yourself or just do the same things. So when I thought about the idea of Curium, I actually realized very quickly I absolutely need a co-founder. And I went, all consulting about it. I project managed finding the right co-founder. I actually went through some 12 people when I was looking for one, and I was very explicit what I want, what it's going to be, and also I was trying to inspire people to do something in the industry that is not deemed very sexy for technology people. As you know, it's very hard to attract talent. So I did found David through, funnily enough, the Antler Network. I'm sure you've heard about them. Yes. David's motivation was always he's really good at what he does. I think he's a genius. But he always worked for other people and for other ideas. And I think it was time for him to try and actually build something scalable himself, not just, on behalf of others, something that would belong to him and be his own creation. And also when I presented him with the problem, I think the first, we went through a very, probably 2-3 months, long process of adjusting to each other and fleshing out the idea. I often saw almost his head starting to almost boil when I was describing the claims process and how insurers work and all that. I could see him reaching the limit, and him not believing that in 21st century something can be as inefficient as this, because he used to work on very cool stuff like blockchain, NFTs and all that before, right? And he used to instant everything, as I said. So it's a hat off for him to bearing with me on this, but also on creating this very sophisticated technology at the back with a very simple and intuitive user interface and experience. I think it is one of his biggest creations in that sense.
That's amazing. And I've heard some really good reports of the the antler experience. I think we're starting to see some really great companies emerge from that kind of from that program. And from what I know, and the folks that don't who are listening to this that haven't heard of it, it's I think a program that kind of takes a bunch of folks that maybe had a more corporate background or kind of had a bunch of breadth. This is my understanding, a big breadth of corporate experience, but kind of want to break into a startup, but are looking for a co-founder or someone to work with. And kind of the situation you described is almost kind of, I guess, the perfect scenario, right? Which is like a technical person looking for a problem to solve, and really like deep domain expert looking for the support of a technical person to solve it. And so, really great program, I think.
We didn't do the program, so I didn't do the program, but he did, and I found him because he did not find that person.
Perfect.
But because he did the program, he essentially signaled to the world that he wants to, and that's how I found him.
That is a sign of a very smart entrepreneur there, Tetiana. Hacked around the corner and found the person you wanted. I absolutely love it. When you are thinking of kind of Curium's purpose, obviously you just spoke about this kind of 3-month process of being thoughtful around how you put it together, and obviously kind of purpose-driven organizations are so important to inspire people and to get the right folks in the business, but also to have a greater good of solving a problem that you think is really important, spending, I guess, your most valuable asset, which is kind of time on. So just interested to, kind of how would you describe Curium's purpose and kind of what you're trying to achieve?
So before I say this, I'll explain where I'm coming from. So whilst a lot of people think about insurance as the top 3 names that are, on billboards and do lots of marketing, actually the real, as I said, guts of the industry, people who are delivering the service, most of them are small and medium companies. They're not, even if you've got a big name, and I'm not going to name any, but the big known names, they hire and use other people to do the jobs. And so the purpose of Curium, and being an MGA actually kind of drove it home for me, because MGA is essentially a small and medium business. You can be even a big MGA, is still a small business in the $100 billion that's insurance industry in Australia. Having even 100 million still makes you very small, right? And so what I found as a very motivating factor is the leveling up the playfield, right? So if you look at the big companies, they often overcomplicate things, and I sat way too often on all kinds of committees and implementation projects of like multi-million-dollar software, 6 years. My worst one was 600 to 900 million euros implementation of a core system. I'm not joking. Euros. 600 to 900 million euros. So whilst they sit there, which is extreme, 95% of others sit nowhere. They cannot afford anything. There's nothing that serves them. So worst case, they do Excel spreadsheets, Outlook, try to customize any kind of CRM or Zendesk or whatever you call it, any kind of outside of industry solution to fit the purpose. And at some point they realize, okay, I'm sitting on large amounts of regulatory risk, large inefficiencies, and I don't even know what's going on in my business. And there's this disparity, right? And maybe some mid-sized companies, they can afford kind of some of the big tech, but essentially I found no one's serving the 95% of people or businesses that actually deliver the insurance service. And this is, to me, I want to professionalize them, and I want to give them the ability to play at par with big guys at a fraction of the cost, as I said.
Love it. And is that kind of, and does your kind of passion sit behind that? Like, obviously you've spoken a little bit about your past and your upbringing and your country of birth, and like those are things that I suppose the passion for the industry is obviously something that I'm very passionate about, and I know that most people that are in the industry are very like there's experiences that kind of drive passion. And so where is that the passion for you, or is it something different?
Oh, it's a combination of multiple things, right? Clearly, it's a passion. I want small and medium businesses to succeed. I don't want them to die because at some point they ran out of money. But also, to be honest, I'm loving and hating being the business owner myself. Because essentially what really drives me, like I wake up in the morning and I'm like, okay, why am I up? Like, what's going on? I love creating something, and I really like going to places that other people did not go before. I'm like, what crazy thing can I do today to test an idea, to run something, right? As you know, in typical cases, 95% of everything fails, but then the other 5, they're actually great experiences that are worth living for. You've tried something and it solved the problem in a completely different way that you did not even think yourself is going to work. And then you're like, oh, that's great. Let me keep digging. I'm very curious, and like I love taking the risk. And I'm kind of not very scared to expose myself to criticism, I guess. That's
such a wonderful trait. And I'm sure there'll be a bunch of folks listening to this who are females in the insurance industry that will be kind of, I suppose, inspired by you and inspired by what you do every day. And I believe that you're a mum of 2 as well, and having starting a startup as a female in a male-dominated industry with a couple of kids. There's a lot of things there that are real challenges, but also kind of step you apart in terms of, kind of being an inspirational figure for a bunch of folks. And so, just really interested in how do you find it? Some days I know are hard. Like, how are you? How is it being a female in the insurance industry, a mum, and a startup founder? Talk to me. How do you do it?
Well, first, like my daughter's now just turned 5 months. I haven't slept in 5 months. It's stressful. It's very stressful because I have to juggle everything. And the best advice I got before my son, who is now 3, was born, unfortunately, was throw cash at the problem. As a founder, you don't have much, but whatever cash you have, essentially get external help, right? So I'm fully relying on help. My husband this time took a paternity leave and took the hit of being almost the primary caregiver for a newborn for all this time. So like, you can never do this alone. It's very stressful. However, in my understanding of the world, and I've realized pretty quickly here in Australia that it's different in every country, but in my family history, and again, upbringing in post-Soviet Union, I'm the 5th generation of university educated professional women. So to me, it was never a choice or anything. And my attitude in life is do whatever you want. Like, a child is not a choice, or woman it was never a factor. It was like, I'm equal. I'm what's the deal, right? So that's kind of the ingoing attitude. Now what I'm getting back from the environment is, of course, as you know, not always what I would consider fair. And especially I found it really, really hard in 2 aspects. One is, whilst people recognize I kind of know my stuff in insurance, I think a lot of people doubt that I understand technology, maybe because I'm female, or maybe because I haven't studied, computer engineering. I'm not sure. Again, it's really hard to say. So that's one. I think it's kind of, it's a problem often. And the second one is, funnily enough, it's the fundraising. I found it really, really, really challenging. The kinds of comments I got, or the kinds of questions I got, it blew my mind. Like, to give you an example, very open. I gave this example at a large conference when I was 9 months pregnant for women. So the question that I was asked after a pitch, so there were probably 20 people. 3 of them were called David, and 1 of them was a woman. The question that I got asked at the end, or it wasn't actually even asked to me directly, it was asked like after that saying, oh, it seemed like you were, so when you're nervous, you stop and then you laugh at the end, like do like a little hee kind of, little laugh. And that's my typical reaction to being in stressful situation. So I do this. And so the comment was, well, I don't believe Tetiana can make it as an entrepreneur because she needs to deal with senior stakeholders. And by having this, she's not credible. She's not serious. And I was like, whoa. Whoa. My very first project at BCG was with the CEO of an Allianz subsidiary in a country when I was like 20 something. So I'm like, whoa, this is like, if I were a man, would anyone ever said something like that?
No, I think you're bang on. I think even if it's like there's just so much subconscious bias, and I think we've seen in Australia specifically and globally, there's this, and also kind of a rise of some kind of venture-backed, some venture-specific VCs, etc. And I think that that's a wonderful thing, but it's like, it is nascent, it's small, and like your story is something that is so frequently heard, I think, which is that kind of that bias towards it often kind of, if you definitive or kind of say what you think, is kind of termed as kind of bossy, but if a guy says it, it's termed as kind of being a leader. Like there's these unconscious things that you see continuously, and so it doesn't surprise me, obviously saddens me. Is there anything that you think that we can do as an industry to change it? Is there anything that you see that we can do individually that has an impact?
Well, I think, individual is probably the most powerful that you can be. So when I'm looking, for example, for people to hire, I am like, I do a lot of, for example, freelance hiring, right, for like specific projects. And I think consciously I'm forcing myself not to go at the top star rated people who like earned 100,000 with doing what they do. But I'm like, okay, maybe I can give someone a chance to, and I would go through the through the list of applicants, so to speak, and I'd say, okay, maybe this person would appreciate me putting my trust in her, or sometimes him. And always I'm looking at like the background, country background, but also any kind of socioeconomic background. And I like, because it's my business, right? It's essentially, if everything goes wrong, it's on me. But I'm like, that's fine. Why else would you do this, right? I believe attitude matters more than talent in the end. So, like, if I give someone a chance, it might change their life. And not all of my experiments were successful, just to give you a heads up. But I'm still doing it. I'm still, every time I do something, I'm like, I should probably just give this person a chance. Same thing, actually, I have this philosophy around the startups in our ecosystem here and also abroad. I'm actually providing very, very good deals up to like no fee for service or something like this for startups, just because I think you have to give people a little push so that when they are successful, you'll be successful with them.
I love it. It's being proactive and deliberate about decision making. I think kind of what that really kind of rings true. Changing tack a little bit. Obviously, you're an InsurTech. You're kind of changing the world in what you do. How do you think? Obviously, there's been some, I guess, the first wave of InsurTech, there was a bunch of successes and some fails, and kind of there's a second wave of growth in a number of different areas. And so, like, if you got a view on, and obviously you saw a bunch of insurers in your kind of BCG days, how are you seeing, or what do you think has changed in the insurance sector with this kind of rise over the last kind of 5 or 10 years of InsurTech? Is there anything that, kind of a few key things that you've kind of taken away or noticed that have really changed and maybe delivering for the future?
Yeah, so I was doing a podcast a couple of months ago, and the host chose one phrase of mine that says "InsurTechs are dead." It's a motto. What I saw, and just back on this 5-10 year journey behind us is a lot of people from non-insurance backgrounds. They've realized that inside of insurance, there's a lot of opportunity to create or to level up the playfield in terms of other industries like e-commerce, and the instant everything expectations. So they've realized that. They came in and they were like, I'm going to change the world because I don't know anything about insurance, but I'll do that. And as you've mentioned, there are a lot of failures because I think people inherently do not understand the risk nature of an insurance business. And that's why you see a lot of the bloated valuations that plummeted, like earlier last year, even below the IPO values of the large American insurtechs. So I think it's still a bit of a wild, wild west, and a lot of people are criticizing, saying insurtech as a word has been misused, because literally every new underwriting agency that comes out is calling themselves an insurtech because they use, I don't know, Outlook. Like it's not really an insurtech. Because they don't have paper anymore. I'm like, that's great. Does it really make you an insurtech? So I think there's a lot of controversy in it, but where I'm hoping that it's going, and it's clearly very much depends on the country you're in and the ecosystem, but at least I can tell for Australia, it's going towards very, very high professional standards. So people who start or run insurtechs, their level of expertise, not necessarily in insurance, but in adjacent areas like data, like geospatial imaging, machine learning, or any kind of things that feed into the larger ecosystem, they are fantastic in terms of their levels of expertise. They really know what they're doing. But then on the other hand, I think the insurance expertise is catching up. So I believe nobody's trying to run an insurtech anymore without any actuary or something, ridiculous like that. So I hope where it's going, is it going towards more professionalization and kind of insurance people, traditional insurance people catching up to the new tech, and the techie and all the other, creators, innovators, recognizing that they need to understand the basics.
So important. The basics of it's been around for a very long time, and for good reason. If you were to think about that on the folks on the other side, so obviously you've got kind of young companies who are trying to grow and do different things and make things more efficient, etc. But you've obviously got the incumbents and the traditional insurers that have generally been around a long time. They've got some really kind of really solid businesses, are very big, have big premium, etc. How do you think they've responded? What do you see in it? How have you seen them respond to date, and like kind of maybe how they're looking to respond over time?
Funnily enough, companies, their single reason of existence is taking the risks. as an industry, they're very risk averse in the way they make decisions, right? So generally, and it's not, by no means applies to everyone, but generally over the many years that I've worked for them as the big insurers, they're very, very slow up to ignorant or even kind of not well-wishing towards embracing the technology or the new things. And unfortunately, and I've said on that side of the table, I think way too many times, I saw that if they embrace something, it's not necessarily for the true value of the innovation. It's because someone really, really well connected and very persuasive sold it to them. It's not necessarily the actual thought about innovation, right? I think that's one piece of how they respond to this. The other piece is a lot of them are actually getting very smart about it. And I believe, for example, AXA Worldwide is one of the good examples, running a venture kind of arm and running this constant innovation type of thing. I think a lot of people are catching up. I believe there was a Zurich survey just that came our way recently that globally they're starting to see how they can engage and so on and so forth. So I think a lot of people are catching up. However, I still believe there's this kind of, I don't know how to call this. It's not ignorance. It's more like let's wait and see type of attitude. Let's wait and see who survives. Or for example, in my business, people are like, well, you're not, New York Stock Exchange listed. I don't know if you're going to be around next year. And I'm like, valid. It's a valid point. However, if you work with me, you're increasing my chances of being around next year, right? Like it's a chicken and egg. So it's an interesting dynamic. I feel risk aversion is still number one kind of key problem, and then not necessarily very smart buying of the technology. I can give you an example. I'm sure you've heard about agile as a way of working, not as a tech. Many companies had really, really bad experiences implementing agile, really terrible experiences. But because it was sold to them through some, reputable name or company, they went with it, and terrible, terrible outcomes. I don't think they're actually saying this aloud, but if you ask the people who had to go through this, they swear about it, like they hate it.
Yeah, it's true. I think the agile was one of those things that it was young companies were doing it. It was then got taken up by some consulting houses and maybe pushed down into some C-suite folks who made some decisions to make their business agile, but didn't inherently have in the core of the business, the operating folks kind of belief in it, or the mindset to deliver it. And then even though they pushed it down, didn't also want to be okay with the approach of small iterative change that could break and fail. And so kind of trying to do it, there was a want and desire to work like it, but not really wanting to have the outcome of it. So I think it's a really interesting thing you call out there. I think it'd be interesting if you now kind of did a cross-sectional study on kind of which corporates have gone back to waterfall or some version of a waterfall approach versus an agile approach after a few $1 billion spent of execution. It'll be a very interesting one, that's for sure.
And high attrition rates of staff.
Yeah. I just want to spend a little bit of time on the future. Obviously, here we try to understand a little bit around, the future insurer. But before we go into that, I thought I'd love to understand the future for Curium. Maybe 2030, maybe 2050, whatever you want in terms of kind of what is the future vision for you look like? Where would you love the company to be, and what impact would you love it to have?
So when I started it, I was actually very clear on where I wanted to be at some point. I say it's a phrase which people don't always understand and might think it's just, something nice to say, but actually I do mean instant everything. Mm-hmm. And creating an experience like this is really, really hard, as you know, because there are a million of small building blocks and mechanisms that have to work together perfectly in order to create this experience, both for the customer of an insurer, but also for the ones who are delivering the work and the service for the insurer, to create instant everything, right? And to be honest, I don't know in which value chain parts Curium's going to play. Right now, we are playing in claims. We're playing in payments. We're playing in compliance. We're playing in different things. And I get asked about a lot of things like, oh, how about policy admin? Recently, I'm asked all the time, how about ECG? Are you going to do something about ECG? And I'm like, well, as a good entrepreneur, I see the opportunity. If you're asking, then it might be of interest, right? So I don't have the vision where it's going to play, but I do have the vision of this excellence in just automating and providing great service, great experience, and also accuracy. Because as I said, a lot of the times when systems don't work together perfectly, or when people don't work together perfectly, there's a lot of inaccuracy, and you get a lot of information lost, or you get, you don't catch wrong behaviors on time, or many things can happen. So what I'm trying to do, I'm trying to provide this really, really reliable, stable base for the business to run and for people to do their jobs while relying on the data they see, relying on the information that came in or out, or the decisions that maybe the system made for them, or the notifications that the system prompted them to do something, right? So I absolutely believe that it's a must. And it's not even the future. Like, I know it will take me time to get there, but in terms of expectation, the expectation is now. So we're probably late in delivering this expectation.
Wonderful. Absolutely love it. And final question from me. It's been such a wonderful exploratory conversation. Obviously we like that with future insurer. What for you, what does the future insurer look like?
It's a great question. I think there'll be a couple of waves that insurers, as anyone else, will go through, right? I think the very kind of near-term wave that everyone is going to go through now is mundane, but it's called payments. I think the world is at the stage where payments must be instant and must be reliable and accurate, not like, bounce backs and all kinds of stories. So that's number one. It has to happen, and it's happening now. So insurers, they want or they don't want, they will have to go through this. The external pressure will force them, right? So that's the first thing. The second, I think, big thing is I personally feel, because everyone is using technology, the talent that is providing and delivering that technology becomes rarity and is very expensive. So what we saw through COVID is the typical, outsourcing kind of arrangements that you go to a lower cost country and hire your talent there are not going to cut it much longer, because every industry, every country is grabbing to the same pool of resources. So, and insurers being traditionally not very attractive places to work for this very, very, out there and innovative talent, right now they pay crazy money. They pay Silicon Valley type of salaries for, mid-level developers or UI UX designers and so on. So I feel large scale, all insurers, they are like IT companies. They run all the full stack themselves, and they make it their problem to run everything. I do feel that big shift is going to be towards buying technology, and like as you were mentioning in the beginning of the intro, like as a Netflix type of thing. So definitely walking away from these, let's do 5 years of integration and $100 million of a price before the technology even starts working. Let's move into this more, mode. Let's roll out a small piece, see how it works. Let's roll out a bigger piece. Let's sign up, subscribe, and kind of reduce the capex, the capital expenditure, but maybe, run it through the OPEX, the operational expenditure. So that's number two. And number three, I definitely believe the climate debate is going to be front and center for everyone. Insurers will not escape it. There's no way, both as a purpose in what they do, but also as how they do. Because whilst they have this mask of being a financial service, and regulated like one, at the back, you have massive supply chains, physical supply chains providing services and doing something for you. So insurers are actually in a really good spot to drive the debate if they wanted to. And I feel they will have to. That's again, no way around it.
They're across the full stack. You're absolutely right. The full stack from top to bottom. Tetiana, this conversation has been so intriguing. Thank you so much for your authenticity, your honesty, your insight. Has been absolutely wonderful. I'm sure everybody has really enjoyed it. Good luck with everything. I'll be cheering from the sidelines for Curium, and I hope you do well. Let's keep in touch and have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you, Nigel. It's been a pleasure.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. I certainly did. To watch the video, jump into the description. The links are there, taking you to our YouTube channel. And if you'd like to hear more from industry leaders who are really pushing the boundaries of insurers, make sure you check out our podcast series of Building Tomorrow's Insurer. Finally, for more content, jump into LinkedIn, into Twitter. Make sure you follow us. We're always providing both the podcast series, kind of mini versions of it, as well as kind of blog content that will be super useful to you, hopefully. Thank you. Have a wonderful day. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.